The moon was an revolting, appalling, useless washout who misplaced his guardian's sense of their betting compulsion and squandered his whole life playing futile video diversions. But sometime recently he knew it. He incidentally entered a mystery-covered-up measurement where a wonderful, enticing vampire murdered him for being the weakest man lively. In his final minutes, be that as it may, you'll be able to summon the most smoking pixie from the past and utilize her body to stir his god shape, giving him the illegal control to annihilate all of humankind. After getting removed for not paying lease, Yun had at last pressed his bag and was prepared to take off. But as he was approximately to board the plane, space-time started breaking, separated, and an entry materialized at the conclusion of his way. Without indeed realizing it, he was this direct into a diverse measurement, and sometime recently his eyes, a winged serpent about, ran him over and finished his wretched life. But whereas he was on the ground, he saw Insect Girl and Tony Stark flying around alongside Hermione on her broom and a white solidified floating past him over his perch head. A young lady was flying a mythical serpent absent, and when a arrive monster licked his appalling confront, Yun at long last realized that he was in a totally diverse world. In the long run, he overseen to discover the stone god, and two entertainers told him that the god will degree his mysterious capacity. But as he touched the stone, a shining white light exuded to daze the others. But the two magicians precluded his revolting acts promptly. And everybody begun snickering at how powerless he was when he pondered why they were snickering. The entertainer clarified that the stone god shines in different lights, but a white light could be a sign of an completely futile human without any enchantment. Fair at that point, in any case, one of them taken note there was a little streak of green light and told him that he had the littlest wooden enchantment in presence. In spite of the fact that the as it were thing littler was the real wood he was covering up, pure casualty strolling absent in disgrace, and pondered why his moment life was almost to be as discouraging as his final. Since no matter how difficult he centered, he wasn't able to cast any enchantment and went through the rest of his week sulking and misery. In any case, an ancient man showed up sometime recently, his eyes telling him not to squander his life absent, since indeed in spite of the fact that he had the weakest enchantment within the world, he was the as it were other individual in this nation to stir. Wood enchantment. As discouraging as being a rancher was, Yun knew he needed a way to form cash and survive. So for the following few weeks, he started overhauling his mysterious capacity until he was able to develop plants with his powers. But on an irregular night, he listened the voice of two basic on their knees for a barrel, kissing her feet. One of the gutless hoodlums started kissing the hot girl's neck, and whereas Yun attempted holding his breath, observing the girl's eyes turned wicked and she bit into his neck to suck all of his blood absent as she started flying. She uncovered her genuine vampiric frame, and when the other basic stirred his torpid mysterious vitality, he started summoning shake clench hands from the ground and launching them towards the vampire. Be that as it may, she dropped his companion and utilized her vines to devastate all of his assaults, sending them smashing towards the ground as the man endeavored to run absent the vampiric vines overseen to control him, and whereas she was drinking his blood, Yun started attempting to escape the scene. But sometime recently he may get distant into the woodland, the vampire's gigantic cannons had as of now taken note he was running absent. And as before long as he thought he was secure, the vampire showed up right behind him. After getting closer and inquiring him what he was doing, Yun attempted running absent from her, but she annihilated the ground and utilized her prickly vines to tie him up. After all the hentai as he'd watched throughout his life, Yun never thought he would be the one to induce entered by appendages. And the vampire had started drinking his blood in his last minutes. An enormous reference point of light detonated towards the sky, and from the profundities of his heart, a young lady materialized and showed up before his eyes. He realized that in case he was the most character, this young lady would be his servant. But the young lady told him that she was from hell and summoned her sword, telling him that she was here to require his appalling virgin life absent. Be that as it may, she realized that his body had as of now passed out, and the vampire told her that Yun was nothing but her scrumptious give up. The red-haired young lady slashed the vines absent and told him that she would spare his soul and re-establish his quality. But in arranged to do so, she was planning to trade the vampire's vitality for his. So she started flying towards the vampire, and sometime recently the vampire was able to indeed arrive her strike. The pixie sliced her down, disposing of her with a single blow. As she drew her essentialness out, she began transporting it to people. Bonnie, and from the distance, a puzzling lady realized it was at last time. A few minutes afterward, Yuan opened his eyes once more, realizing that the young lady had spared him and inquired her in the event that she was his pixie. He pondered in the event that she would ended up his individual housekeeper and permit him to use her each night. But the young lady pondered in the event that he was able to recognize her. Be that as it may, Yuan had never seen her sometime recently in his life, but the fairy told him that the as it were reason she spared his life was so that she seemed conclusion it herself. As she let those words out, the pixie started flying towards him with her sword. But after cutting him down, the wound showed up on her body. She pondered what Yuan was doing, and the strange young lady showed up, presenting herself as the chairman of the Shouyu Institute. She told the fairy to calm her revolting ass down, since in case she proceeds hurting her summoner, she would be the as it were one accepting the harm. Be that as it may, the pixie didn't accept her words and attempted slicing him down once more, but was thumped down. So the chairman came to Yuan and given him the soul manual, telling him to raise his hand as before long as he touched the book. A light radiated around him and his body started talking on its claim, summoning the pixie to return back into her book and uncovering that her title was Mao Fei. Afterward that night, the chairman said that his unused book would clarify the history of the pixies. But since it had a place to Shiloh Foundation, the as it were way she would grant it to him is in the event that he were to go to their school and find the vampire stowing away among them. In return, be that as it may, she guaranteed to deliver him 3 more pixie seeds that would be indeed more grounded than Mollify. So Yuan got on his knees and promised to be the most excellent understudy, lively, wondering what sorts of pixies he was progressing to include to his him following. While reading the manual at night, the framework interior the book enacted, telling him that this book contained the memory world of the pixies. After all, pixies aren't born, but are the incarnations of past lives. So the as it were way to fully control a pixie is to go into her recollections and become a close acquaintance with her. In any case, Yuan was as well powerless to go into more stage recollections presently, so she told him to come back in 24 hours and fuse the book into his cell phone and supplant Siri, making their communication simpler. The taking after day at school, everyone was appalled that the disappointment was getting to be in their classes, so one of the folks attempted humiliating him by rolling an ice gem on the ground. As Yuan went to choose up the trap, an enormous green light radiated around them, gleaming with a moment light and making Yuan the primary individual in history to have a twofold trait in a moment. His body checked the complete room until he found the hottest young lady running up to her and utilizing his most noteworthy Reddit choose up line. Wondering if she would maybe curious about doing a fork noodle. Be that as it may, she ran absent in embarrassment, and the folks were stunned that Yuan was the bravest chat alive after running absent. He inquired the framework in his phone to clarify why he misplaced control over his body, so the fairy told him he'd stir the charm ability in his rest in conjunction with his auxiliary mysterious quality the wind enchantment for the rest of the day. All the young ladies thought he was the coolest fellow lively. But amid enchantment fight course, Yuan was the as it were one who couldn't keep up with the pace. When they were at long last done, the educators told them that they will be practicing their enchantment yield in duels, and the one who was bullying Yuan earlier volunteered to fight within the first coordinate and challenged Yuan to be his adversary. So when the educator shouted at Yuan to require his position, they both confronted off against one another. But the princess of the country arrived and was progressing to be watching their duel. The appalling moron swore that he would overcome Yuan for the princess and propelled his blades of wind towards him. But Yuan had invalidated his attack without indeed attempting. However, his adversary propelled a tornado towards him, and Morph told him to summon her as of now and wrap up this coordinate right absent. In any case, Yuan needed to handle his adversary alone and propelled into the center of the tornado, enacting his nature magic to destroy the useless dolt. But after winning the coordinate, Yuan was thumped out and woke up a whereas afterward interior the burning town. As he strolled around, a man ran up asking for Yuan to spare him. But a solid man pulled him to the ground. And as he slithered backwards, he saw a small young lady shuddering, telling him that she was cold. Realizing she was burning up, he chosen to cool her body down with a towel. But she passed out on him. Sometime recently long, two ugly losers appeared from the back road. Pondering how numerous gold coins they may offer the young lady for you and attempted halting them but got his nauseating confront smack down and they carried her away. Determined to spare her, he grabbed her up and started running off. But they caught up to him and started beating him as he ensured the girl when she said thanks to him for sparing her. He realized that she was Mofi and started falling towards a light. Fair at that point he woke up and the leprechaun told him that he was within the pixie soul world. This world was the space of their recollections which it was the as it were way to pick up full control over his pixie. Since they were initially human, all the recollections from their human life were remembered in this world which the as it were way to have control over his pixie was to understand her feelings, choosing to investigate her arrangement. You'll be able called upon the pixie, but she had no time for his bullshit and requested to know what he needs. So you started telling her that he was a honorable man who tips his fedora and accepts in regarding all ladies, saying that he would never command her to do anything she didn't bolster. She thought his discourse was motivating, but said that he was the same as each other individual in her past. Fair at that point, two young ladies with gigantic cannons showed up interior and the UN stowed away himself beneath the covers as the young ladies gone by one of the prior tastes inquiring to taste the rest of his meat UN realized they were the vampires he was inquired to discover. In any case, they had as of now taken note his nearness, and Yuan was anxious that they would make him his supper sometime recently Mollify might be summoned. Fair at that point, the vampire lord showed up within the room and told the young ladies that they have an obligation afterward this evening. After returning home, Yuan started to ponder where the chairwoman of the school had gone. Stressed he would get wiped out before long. Within the night, Yuan chosen to eat moment noodles, but before long listened strides exterior considering it was the vampires he chosen to cover up, pondering how they found his domestic. Be that as it may, the interloper was as it were a young lady, and she taken note the tasty smell interior. But you had thumped her out with a punch. Right at that point he found that she was the princess and thought he would be executed on the off chance that he was spotted beating her up. Realizing she was alone, he chosen to drag her interior and laid her on the bed and having no other put to rest, he chosen to lay by her side. In any case, when it was morning, she thought he was a perv and thumped out his tooth sometime recently kicking his plots with his future seeds near to getting obliterated. Yuan started clarifying that he made a difference her interior after she passed out on his porch. So after a minute he realized he seemed entice her by creating instant noodles. And as she took a spoon, she thought it was scrumptious. Fair at that point, she detected a nearness exterior and told him that somebody was at the entryway. At that moment, a vampire broke down the door, but Yuan and the princess had as of now sneaked off into the other room. As the vampires raided his house, they pondered where he was stowing away and indeed caught a jolt sometime recently it broke. One vampire taken after his sent to an entryway and crushed it with her mammoth cannons, but found it purge. Be that as it may, as they attempted pulverizing the room, Yuan controlled them with vines and started running absent with the princess. As they arrived within the woodland, he told her to stow away behind the trees. But after a couple of minutes, the vampires had as of now arrived as they charged at him. Yuan summoned Mollify to battle for him. So instantly she showed up with the flaring vitality, drawing her sword and impacting the vampires absent and raised her sword to summon the grave of hell. The vampires thought they had a chance and attempted assaulting her, but she cast a spell that burned them with hellfire and they realized they were caught in an undetectable obstruction. Be that as it may, the obstruction abruptly split and the vampire ruler plummeted to the ground. The young ladies thought they were secure, but he crushed them immediately. And the leprechaun told you which he was a level late night. Indeed so, Moment remained energetic to fight, and they charged at each other, clashing swords. But she guaranteed to still kill you. And a short time later, as she pulled back, she found that she was injured and inquired the leprechaun for her offer assistance. So she told him that the only way to extend Murphy's quality was to modify her soul world and thought it would be simple and told her to teleport him to the soul world. But she told him that his otherworldly control was not enough. At the same time, Murphy within the night clashed swords. But he pushed her off as realized that he had depleted his otherworldly quality amid the duel. He pondered how he might recuperate it. Fair at that point, the princess showed up sometime recently telling him that she was a otherworldly ace and might help him with sufficient otherworldly quality to teleport to the soul world. So he told her to close her eyes and guarantee to serve her noodles for a year in case she would allow him her quality. But once she begun gathering her otherworldly powers, but the knight smacked Mapai aside and summoning a control of his possess, he unleashed a fire to annihilate him. Fortunately, Mapai saved him, taking the affect and the vitality entered an interior her soul world. Mapai killed a few desperados, but chosen to save the final one as he argued for benevolence. Fair as she started to take off, the lowlife thought he could sneak up on her and started running to kill her. But Yuan shouted at her to observe her back and she wounded him quickly. Be that as it may, when he rushed to meet her, she went right through him and they realized that she seemed not see them with you. And stunned by this revelation, the ship said this was as it were conceivable on the off chance that his soul as of now existed in this world. That evening, as Murphy showed up from alley, she spotted a man sometime recently her and told him that she likes his long sword and trusts to purchase it. But he told her that it wasn't up for deal as she cleared out and thought this modern fellow looks as revolting as he does, and pondered in case he may have affected her past by one means or another. After a few days, Mapai taken note the mysterious man playing with the kid's exterior and thought he was a honorable man. Be that as it may, when he attempted saying hello, she closed up her window. Right away, that day within the road, a gather of bullies begun beating up Mr. Man of his word, but he proceeded ensuring a young lady when Mapai arrived at the back road. She developed irate at the sight, recalling that you had spared her within the same way when she was more youthful. As the pioneer attempted thumping out his tooth, she caught and pressed his hand. And as they realized that she was a notorious killer, the defeatists ran off instantly to thank her for sparing them. The man advertised her his long sword, calling it a blessing, and she cut a glass to test on the off chance that it was honed. So in trade for the sword, she told him that she would spare him at whatever point he was an inconvenience. In any case, Yuan thought she was being mated into a trap considering that the man was a spy and had intention held up to draw her consideration, considering that the man had effectively deceived her and was driving her right where he needs. In the interim, the princess was starting to deplete her powers at the same time. Mapai within the night, proceeded clashing swords, but he kicked her absent, making an blast to annihilate her body. Indeed so, she was bowed on ensuring and as the vampire unleashed a capable air, Mapai stood in his way and he charged at her with his Aurora sword. Prepared to die. She calls her sword to disappear and his long sword entered profound interior her. In any case, she chosen to activate a revile with her blood. And at that moment, huge vines bound him up, and she realized that he would as it were remain caught for as long as she was lively. Indeed so, she was decided to secure Yuan until her final breath, but was pitiful that she might not alter the past within the soul world. You indeed started to ponder how they seem gotten to be unmistakable to Mapai. With his endeavors having demonstrated pointless, he decided to shout at the fellow calling him a useless moron, hoping he would listen his voice so the man told him to close the fuck up and indeed realize that he has trust. The fellow said that they have the same soul but Yuan told him that he was fiendish and requested to know what he extraordinary to do with the young lady. Yuan's interchange soul presented himself as anew the improvement of letters of his title and told Yuan that Malfoy was just an NPC in their amusement. But Yu had told him that she was vital to him. The next day, Murphy listened strides exterior her loft and as anew thumped on her entryway, she pulled him interior and about finished his life. Be that as it may, he was unfazed and told her that her eyes are prettier than the stars. When she inquired why he had come, he told her that he came to offer her a few nourishment, but she realized that it had spilled on the floor as she pulled him inside, feeling pitiful. She attempted to require it, but he guaranteed to form her another one and decided to take off you and tried screaming at her to come to her faculties. As in he was just toying with her heart. But his words were emptier than the disgust that evening as they sat on a tower taking within the lovely sight. And you told her that the tower was the most secure put within the city. He said that he was an pilgrim and had traveled all over the world in look of treasure. But she pondered why a weak, revolting failure like him was able to travel any place. He told her that he wants to require her to a distant absent island and to spend every day making her more joyful. But she pondered in case she seem forsake her present life. Inside many days, she had started killing cheats, but before long came over a new exterior the back street and hid her sword, perplexed he would be disillusioned. He told her that he bought fixings for supper and recommended that they head domestic together, but she told him to head domestic to begin with and guaranteed to connect him as soon as he cleared out. She hid inside the back road and was sad to have deceived him when she arrived home. And you uncovered the nourishment he made, saying that it was a special supper his mama used to create. Be that as it may, you and I thought each single word was a lie and pondered why Mofa was as well bonehead to see beyond his lies. Feeling bad for herself. She tried telling him that she was an executioner, but he told her that he loves her besides and was fortunate to be by her side. She told him that a man had secured her when she was small and it made her grow determined to live. So. And you said that he wasn't getting to take off her just like the other man and would stay by her side until the end of time. By the taking after day, Mofi began wondering how she would make sufficient cash for their trip to the island. The society ace thought her trip was a trap and cautioned her to remain absent from over again. But she was as of now misplaced within the domains of Adore. In her intellect was made up as she met him that evening. She uncovered that she had bought 2 tickets for their transport and could not hold up to urge out of this hellhole. So he told her to hold up for him at the tower the following day. Moment confronted slave, another cheat taking it for her last murder. And after returning home, she closed her box and started to take off within the road. She came over 2 fellows who started prodding her approximately her trip. In any case, when they realized she seemed conclusion them immediately, they begun asking for her pardoning. Fortunately, Moment was in a great disposition nowadays and chosen to take off. After arriving at the tower, Mollify was energized approximately taking off the city. But Yuen pondered why and you had told her to hold up for him here. He had a terrible feeling almost this and thought this must be the reason why Mollify got to be an irate pixie. When it was evening, Mollify realized that and he was still not there. But thought he was deferred by activity or something and chosen to keep on holding up. Yuen pondered what Anu's plan was and thought he was certainly bring forth something fiendish by the 3rd night. Mollify remained on the tower, decided to hold up for her ruler Charming. She had imagined of this moment for weeks and thought he may arrive as before long as she clears out. Be that as it may, Yuen knew way better and started shouting at her to return to her faculties, but there was no utilize. When it was morning, the society ace uncovered that their town had been attacked by desperados in her non-attendance. Which no one seemed allude to the city. Indeed so, Mollify told him that she wouldn't take off until seeing the Adore of her life. Fair at that point, the outlaws blew up the tower, and as Mollify recaptured awareness, she thought her man must have been captured and rushed to spare him as she ran down the steps. She started hearing his voice interior her head and was pitiful that they wouldn't make it to the island together in a moment. She killed 2 outlaws, but as she arrived exterior, the other desperados debilitated to dispose of a young lady irritated by the locate. She surged forward and killed them all as she attempted calming the young lady. She stabbed her with a cut, and Mollify realized she was one of them at that minute. And you showed up sometime recently her eyes and the young lady told him that Mollify was more gullible than a chicken. Her words were cold, and Mollify realized that she was a futile, revolting washout after all. Frantic to reach him, she started slithering towards the men. But one desperado told her that her significant other had proposed the arrange himself. A few weeks prior, he had told the desperados that he would capture her and in return requested to be in charge of the eastern locale for his arrange to succeed. He had asked for a simple sword and was persuaded that it was all he required. At this realization, Mofa started strolling towards them, decided to come confront with Au and disregarding you on screen since she may not listen him besides. In any case, she was before long constrained to her knees and the lead desperado told them you that he has no eagerly of letting her live, as Mofa recalled their minutes together which it was all a trap. She shouted like she had misplaced her mind at the same time, the outlaws begun vanishing and the others ran absent as a gather of pixies annihilated the town, put the town in blazes. And you welcomed Mofa for a conversation irritated by his revolting, appalling confront, she started charging at him with her sword, but a ship blocked her attack. And after that you told her that he was unkillable. Indeed so, Mofa wouldn't stop and began attacking the ship, but she blocked everything. As she grew angrier, she struck with all her quality. But her sword broke in half and she collapsed from her harm. And you thought she was intense and advertised to assist her live. So he calls the bloom to start shining and told her to gotten to be a pixie in return for her revenge. He told her that he voyages over the world in look of commendable ladies to convert into a pixie and said that she might as it were gotten to be one on the off chance that she was willing to. Driven by outrage and despise, Mofa concurred to gotten to be a pixie saying that she would return to dispense with him, indeed in a resurrected world. He told her that the blossom was called another shore which they would meet once more in a resurrected world at that moment, expansive vines bound her and you and attempted punching in you for being a ass, but went through him and fell to the ground when he requested to know why he was harming her. And you told him that she was only an NPC and was attempting to offer assistance her advance as they showed up interior a void. He told him that they were the same soul and that they have the same dream of prevailing the world. In any case, he considered this world a video diversion and may care less about what happens here. Irritated by his words, Yuan commanded him to free Mofa. But at that point you vanished and told him that he was too weak and futile to do anything. Once Yuan wondered where he vanished to, the leprechaun told him that he was as it were talking to his soul parts that was cleared out in this world. And uncovered that the vines was the seal catching Mofa frantic to spare her. Yuan punched the vine, but realized that it was futile and thought he may free her by offing himself after all, her seal had opened only since the vampire killed him. The leprechaun thought it was a appalling thought and told him that his soul had built this world which it was fueled by his spiritual strength. Without this control, he would never wake up, she said. But he told her that his life was irrelevant, but realized that he was as well chicken to wrap up the work. Fair at that point, the ground started trembling and they realized that this world would soon disappear. At that minute, Yuan got to be determined again, considering it was the as it were way to spare moment confidence and started climbing up the vines. When he was high enough, he started telling Mofa that she was the love of his life and has chosen to forsake his want of having a collection of mistresses just so he can have her as he gave her a farewell kiss. He promised to return and tossed himself off to the ground at that minute. Mofa started to keep in mind him in her recollections and how he had attempted to caution her almost. And you fair at that point she woke up and as she began liberating herself, the vines vanished immediately. When she showed up sometime recently she pulled out the sword and hurled it absent. But as before long as she realized he was dead, she started to cry, pondering why he had chosen to stay a ensemble, direct himself for her. She was sad to see him dead, having realized that he wasn't the same individual that deceived her. So she wished to see him once more and said that she needs to remain by his side for the rest of her life. Be that as it may, she had no powers to stir him and realized that she would be forlorn until the end of time. Choosing to embrace the ground, she started to take off. But Yuan recaptured awareness and held her ankle. He was questionable how he returned to life, but told her that her burial service discourse was touching. In any case, she developed irate, realizing how nauseating his face was and summoned her sword to eat by his ass for great, afraid for himself. He begun asking for her absolution, saying that he overseen to enter her soul world utilizing the princess's soul vitality so that he would spare her. He had been the extreme simp by deciding to embrace the ground without indeed being beyond any doubt he would return to life. So when she realized his life was as well futile, to indeed take absent, she chosen to save him to utilize his chance. Unsuggested that they combine their spirits to vanquish their foe. So she held his hand and said that they were accomplices for life. And that's the end of our video. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of the amazing anime recap videos.